Alright, so because I'm going to rewire this, I'm going to remove this knee controller first. We got the one screw off there, and then the second screw to get this cover out of the way. And then I'm going to just clip the wires out of these crimp connectors. I'm gonna have to open those crimp connectors later, but that'll help me keep track of what is happening when I wire the machine back up, because I'm gonna switch it out for a regular controller, so I'm gonna have to remember these two white wires for the controller, and then because we'll be back at a 3-point connection, this is the motor controller for pin 2, and then we've got a white and a red for the 2 power connections. And because this machine has that switch on the bobbin winder, that's why it's got all these this extra pair of wires that run inside it. It's got a white wire and a red wire that go up into the machine for the lamp, and then it has this red and black that are on that switch on the bobbin winder. So just get this controller out of the way. Nice little carbon pile knee controller here, but again, without the key arm, it's not much use. So that out of the way, and the machine's a little bit lighter, and then I'm going to remove the plug on the back of the machine and bring the wires from the new controller in through that hole, so when I put the bottom back on, it'll be nice and clean. Yeah, so and I think I'm going to have to cut these crimped connectors off because I'm giving them a little twist and they're feeling kind of loose, so they may not have been crimped real well. We'll check that as we go here. Trim these 2 wires off the socket, and I'm going to turn this around and look at the outside of the socket. Yep, here's the outside of the socket. The 2 screws have those bolts on the back, so I'm just going to loosen that and remove it, and then I will come back when I have my controller wires to rewire on the inside. Alright, I'm going to rewire this 120714, and I've got the old socket removed, so there's a hole here. I trimmed the 2 crimped connectors off, the one that had the controller on it and the one that had the live wire, and then the common comes out of the machine here. That was also crimped to the controller, and I'm gonna just take one of these old 3-pin sockets. You see it's got 2 cords molded out of it. This is Janome Baby Lock, one of those. It's got an electronic controller on one end and a wall plug on the other. So I'm going to follow the side with the wall plug and trim the wall plug off first. And then cut the wall plug and set that up in there and get it connected. All right, one side of the plug is connecting the two red wires in here. So I'm going to get those three soldered together here. Right, make sure that's, there we go. And then we'll be covering that with shrink wrap to make sure it's properly insulated. Next up is the common, which is this white wire. And that one went to the white pin on the socket and one side of the controller that was mounted under here. So I have the other wire off of the plug that I cut off that controller, and then I brought the controller in, and I've got my shrink tubing in place already, and I'm going to tin these two because I'm having, now that I've got more wires in place, it's harder to get them to stay together. So if I tin everything and solder the two pliers to bend that over, and now there we go. And then I can slide shrink tubing onto the joint and get that covered. For this joint, because it was so short, I used two pieces of shrink tubing, one on either side of the joint, and then I pushed them over and they overlap in the middle. So there's insulation here, shrink tubing covering this half of the joint, and then it's on top of the shrink tubing that continues over the joint and back onto the insulation of the white wire there. Otherwise you end up with pieces of shrink tube that are a little bit short, and sometimes I find that I'll have miscut them and I'll end up with a piece that's not quite covering insulation on both sides of the joint. So that's a little trick there for these straight through connections like this, where you don't have a lot of room to slide the heat shrink tubing along, is to use two pieces and then have them join over the joint like that. This first connection, because I made that with all three of the wires facing the same way, I had a long piece that I folded over, and then I put a second piece over the folded bits. So there's a, it looks open here, but if you look inside, it's actually a folded piece of heat shrink tubing in there. So there's no way to poke in and get at either of those. And then our last connection is this other controller connection. And that's another one that I'm not doing a long straight splice. It's going to have this tip and both wires fitting out the same side, so I can just put shrink wrap over it when I'm done. Oh, and I didn't grab the shrink wrap for that, so I'll put the shrink tubing on there, and then I'm going to come up with a strain relief for this. As you can see, I built a little bit of a strain relief out of just some right angle brackets and hardware I had around. There is some extra padding on the wire, so it's not and I made sure that that was smooth. These metal pieces are smooth, but now the wire doesn't yank in and out easily, so I can put the bottom back on this machine, and I think it should be ready to test out. Alright, here's the new controller, and with it all oiled up, the light turns on and off, ready to test.